Hello, listeners, and welcome to a very special episode of Geopolitical Cousins. Joining me on this episode of the podcast, besides Cousin Marko and myself, is Peter Zeihan and Matt Gertken. Part 2 of the podcast, we decided to let our hair down a little bit. I don't have any hair to speak of, but we talked a little bit about geopolitics as a discipline, some of the greatest intellectual forces in our lives, and really just talked back and forth about a lot of things in our field and in the world and things like that. If you haven't checked out our YouTube page, by the way, you can find this video on YouTube. The audio content will be the same, but since we were all in person, I think it actually does add something. So thank you to Peter, thank you to Matt, thank you to Marko, thank you to the video editors and the audio editors that helped us out here. Without further ado, we hope you enjoy these episodes. Cheers, and we will see you out.
All right, so for round 2, I mean, y'all have better hair than I do. I was going to say we're going to let our hair down a little bit, but I'm barely...
Shortest hair I've had in 5 years.
Matt's let his hair down. We're already let our hair down in other ways.
Yeah. We're also drinking rye whiskey, which is, we're...
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Hey, good to be back.
L'chaim.
There we go.
Oh.
Being all Canadian about it with the eyes.
So let's get started. It's good that we're drinking because the first question that we were going to ask here, and this is going to be much looser than our first one. I'm just going to throw it out and then we'll just...
Because the first one was so...
Structured,
yeah.
Oh, it was relatively structured. I was sitting here thinking about structure. I will not be sitting here thinking about structure this time. Most formative moment in your life as a geopolitical strategist. This is also an opportunity for us to talk about Stratfor, if we so choose. And you can choose not, but take that.
So, I mean, we should mention that all of us worked at Stratfor, and Peter hired the two of us. We have mentioned that. When did you join, Jacob? That was in 2007 for us.
I was a George nepotism, well, not even higher. Like my dad and George went to graduate school, and after it's, and I was waiting tables and I had nothing to do. And George was like, "You can come be an intern. That's fine. We'll give you $200 a month." And I was like, "Okay."
But you ended up being like one of the top strategists.
I mean, it was because the first year I spent pestering people about timelines. The second year I was head of the watch officers. But I mean, and this is not my moment, but I'll share this moment. One of my most memorable moments when people actually started taking me seriously was the Arab Spring, and the protests were crescendoing in Egypt. And I think it was either Thursday or Friday at like 5 p.m. And Hosni Mubarak was supposed to come and give a speech. And everybody in the office was like, he's going to step down. He's going to announce that this is done. He's going to hand over control to the military. That's a wrap. And I'm fresh out of college, and like I did my degree in Middle Eastern Studies, and I was like, there is no way Hosni Mubarak is stepping down. I'm telling you right now, that's not what he's coming on to. And everybody was like, shut up, intern. Go get some more coffee. Like, we're going to be here for a while for the reaction piece. And then I wish I could do the Arabic and his like low guttural growl. But he gets on TV, and the translation is basically like, I am the father of the Egyptian people. I will not be stepping down from this thing. And then nobody said thank you. Nobody was like, then call. Everybody just like scurried away and started writing. And I was like, okay, fine.
But you won some cred. You had to have won some cred.
Maybe a little.
By the way, that was one of your really nice pieces, was when Mubarak stepped down. You like in 5 minutes wrote this thing that's like, what does this mean? What happens next?
I'll have to take your word for it.
Oh, I mean, I'm sure from like, it wasn't like one of those long-term structural forecasts. It was just like but the fact that you wrote it in literally 5 minutes was, I remember being very impressed.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I also have something I make this joke often in audiences when people ask me, what is Stratfor? What is geopolitical analysis? And I say, well, there's basically 2 schools of geopolitical analysis. There is Eurasia Group, which is basically the Marvel Avengers version. And then there is, Stratfor, which was George, and DC Comics. Right on down to the success of both franchises, right? Like the Snyder Cut was not good. We had all this good material to work with, and we just could not get out of our own way.
The Snyder Cut was amazing.
Well, I liked it, but the market did not.
The market did not.
But you know what? But look, I just want to say, like, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but all 4 of us are sitting here.
It's true.
Matt and I have been linked together in our careers, but I did leave BCA and he became top geopolitical strategist in finance on his own. So I just think the coaching tree is really good.
Yeah,
like,
really.
And I think, like here we are all sitting here having some whiskey and like making fun of those days. But the fact that, like that moment in history, that like there was almost something in the water in Austin between 2008 and 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was a booming...
Well, for you too.
Yeah. No, I mean, well, you too. But I mean, like you as well. I mean, obviously you're part of you're the coach, right? Like, I mean, you know, you and George, I mean, you guys are the coaches, but the coaching tree, I think, look, all I'm saying is that when all is said and done, at the end of the day, when all is said and done, all we want to look back on is, did I like contribute to other people's lives, and did they like take a kernel of something I passed on and make it even better, and or take it in a different direction, and were they inspired, you know? And I think that, I mean, you certainly can say that, but yeah, that moment in time was successful.
I mean, you know, I would take issue with what you said, where what little success I have had as a geopolitical strategist, I've made a career out of it. At least there's that. It definitely wasn't by myself. I mean, Peter, you were like a massive mentor, like for sure, and to all of us. But like we had a whole cohort.
I have favorites.
Yeah, well, okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
But I mean, Marko, the weird thing about you, we were the same age. We started on the same day. But I mean, like I learned so much, and then of course that carried on into the.
It goes both ways.
And sure. And then Jacob, like you always held your own. You were a younger cohort than we were, but you were always like at the top of a younger group.
That's nice. I mean, I feel like, Peter, you were probably there for battles that none of us saw. And I feel like I was there at I was at the end of the golden age. Like I could feel the magic like starting to dissipate and people they're going their own directions. And I also have the advantage of being the youngest one here. So like I remember the first time you did a blue sky, and I'd never heard your shtick before. And I was like, I walked out of there like, holy shit. Oh, yeah. Like, how am I going to do this?
So
stuff? And I remember like, you know, being in the office late and you thundering away on some language I couldn't recognize on your phone. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do that. And then you were my, you know, across the cubicle person sitting under that Japanese imperial flag. And you were using terms about the Chinese. I had no clue. I'm sitting there doing data entry that's probably done by AI right now. And, you know, Kevin Steck yelling at me because I didn't do it correctly.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I mean, to your point, like I looked up to all of you. I wouldn't be where I am without all of you. I took kernels from all of you.
I think the thing to explain maybe is that it was a bit of a battle zone. Like when you walked into that company, it wasn't like you were walking into a normal place where people treated each other in a normal, it was more like a competition, a controlled competition.
Chaos, too,
you know, yeah, chaos and intellectual competition and long hours. But there was a sense of mission, which, you know, I don't know if you guys were doing that deliberately, you know, the management, but the point was that like, there was a sense that like no one else was really doing real geopolitics, covering all the crazy shit that was happening around the world. And so that was pretty motivating.
I don't want to talk too much about the internal of Stratfor because apparently my memories of it are not nearly as positive as yours, and I don't want to ruin that. But I can speak to that. Stratfor started in 98, 99 with the Kosovo War, just before I joined. And one of the things that happened in Washington around then is every think tank that did international affairs as its primary business closed. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the Soviet Union, we had about 20 of them. And by 2000, they were gone. Mm. I mean, there were groups like CSIS where that was like one thing they did was foreign affairs, but that was it.
Well, look, Rand, again, one thing.
Exactly. And so what we saw in policymaking is that the ingest pipeline for talent into the agency, into DOD, into state, went almost to zero. And then 9/11 happened, and whatever started up was based on terrorism and the Arab world, and nothing else.
Nothing else.
And until Eurasia group got a little bit bigger, and it's still not very big, there really wasn't anyone else out there doing any of it. So there was always this space where if you could get a job at Stratfor, you were the only one who could do foreign affairs who was under 55 in the country. And the magnet generated a talent inflow that was fantastic.
Well, I mean, we have to admit that Austin at that moment, Austin was having a moment.
Austin was having a moment for different reasons.
You know, and that helped to create what was also a
you know, I hear what you're saying, but you almost downplay your role.
Oh, I benefited from it hugely. And
the fact your role as a mentor, and I think
the fact that you guys like me, that's great.
but even if we didn't like you, you would coach. The point is that you would coach, and actually George Friedman would coach. I mean,
Roger Baker too. Like just like shout out. Look, everybody had different management styles and everything, and like I obviously like, you know, shook my fist in private many times, like you included. But like, look, the truth is.
I know what you're referring to, and I'm so sorry.
No, if it was just the pipeline, if it was just the pipeline, you know, but look at the three of us here. Off the pipeline, I would say the three of us were maybe in the lowest 10%. No offense. I mean, like you did go to Cornell, so fine.
Diversity.
That was a joke, by the way.
Any person, any stuff.
Look, what I'm trying to say is like, the three of us happened to be in Austin randomly. Okay, you were you brought in as a Nepo baby, but me and Matt, we were randomly, like we walked into this firm randomly. We weren't one of the.
I moved from DC for the job.
Right, for the job.
Which when I got there, found out there had not been an offer. That was a different story.
That's a different story. We don't have to go into that. But like my point about all of this is that I think if you just said like, hey, the success was just great talent, didn't know where else to go, so they went and they worked under me. Like that's kind of what you could have, said. But like the truth is
definitely not what I meant.
Yeah. But there was like a lot of like, I think also, I think what it was is this. And this is what I would say to everyone listening to this, because like we all get a lot of inbound on LinkedIn from young people.
More and more.
More and more, obviously.
Yeah,
and
that's a big trend.
the issue is that it was one of the only places on the planet that taught you how to do geopolitical analysis with a commercial purpose.
Yeah.
And that.
I think you could say that first part independently.
Yes.
Yeah, it's true.
The second
Fair.
part just made it more viable.
Yeah.
Yes. But that's what it was. And I mean, me personally, like what I would say about you and specifically, what I think you taught me more than anyone in my career is that cool. Every like you obviously got to do the research and the analysis has to be good. But like if you're not telling a story that someone wants to listen, you're not going to get through.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, so many people in the financial industry, in the geopolitical analysis industry, whatever industry you're in, they just don't understand.
So boring.
Yeah. Thank you. And like the truth is, no matter how good your analysis is, if nobody reads it, and I think number one, like style of writing, your presentation skills. That's what I would say. Like first time I saw Peter present,
I was like,
it was like, God damn, like that's where you want to go.
Yeah,
like that's like.
That was also unplanned. I was the kid in third grade who wet his pants in speech class.
Hey, man, like
Swore to myself
amazing.
I would never let that happen again. I may have overcompensated.
But that I think
was not
too.
interesting.
All right, so like,
Wait, no, I wanted to ask Peter a question because you said that at the time in 98, 99, there was no pipeline. Do you think that's true again? Because there has been such a deterioration, I feel like, of the pipeline of organization.
Yeah. It never really recovered. So, the United States really has a hard time focusing on more than one thing at a time. And that's societal, that's government. And so when the war on terror had been going on for so long, what we saw was a change within the structure of the government and the intelligence agencies itself. Because what's the best example I can give you? Okay. There's two types of intelligence. There's strategic, where you're looking over the horizon and trying to figure out what the world of tomorrow is going to be and how to get ready for that. So like, who's our enemy going to be in 2050? It's going to be Slovakia for whatever reason. What kind of tanks are they going to be using? Well, these hover tanks with 2 barrels. Okay. Where's the weak point in that armor? What sort of anti-hover tank weapons do we need to fight Slovakia in 2055? That's strategic intelligence, for example. Tactical intelligence. We have people on the ground in Ramadi about to kick in the front door of this building. The bad guys on the 3rd floor at the end of the hall, the blue door. Which side of the door are the hinges on? Do they need to bring something to bust it open, or do they need to bring explosives because the hinges are on the wrong side? They're both intelligence. They're both important. But for 20 years, we were supporting the military in the field, and that took precedence. And after 20 years, it's not that we lost the people who knew how to look for the next Slovakia. We lost the people who trained the people to look for Slovakia. And so we're now in this moment that, let's put Trump to the side for now, where they're trying to rebuild the training cadre that can look forward. And that's not something you do in 2 or 3 or 5 years.
well, and I think, as I think the only one here that like pursued political science at a graduate school level and contemplate being a professor, I can tell you that it's not just the government's failing; it's academia's failing too.
It's a long conversation.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know everybody here agrees with that, but I can go very specific.
Yeah.
Being like,
Pretty sure we can too.
no, but like,
to Peter's point, why was I a Middle Eastern Studies major? Because I went to college in 2006. And that was where they pushed me. I wanted to do poli-sci, and they pushed me into, no, do the Arabic program, and we need guys who speak Arabic, and that's what you're going to do.
what I'm trying to say is that the word geopolitics was a dirty word in academia and political science.
Oh, definitely.
It was considered deeply, deeply racist.
I was in a PhD PhD program at University of Texas where I was in a class called International Organizations, taught by a NATO expert, and a guy who wrote a book on NATO. And it was all about how to analyze the dependent and independent variables in the statistical elegance of the modeling used.
Behavioralism.
Not even behavioralism, honestly, not even behavioralism.
Not even that.
Not even that. No, it was just like, how do you do a study on this? How do you create a data set out of fucking thin air? Most of the variables in there are garbage.
Yeah, that's behavioralism.
No, I mean, part of it is, but like there's other things too, just rational choice theories, like random stuff. Behavioralism. But here's what I'm getting at. There's a whole week when we had NATO. NATO was the week. Mm-hmm. And, I was always bored in this class, and one of my colleagues raises her hand and says, hey, just out of curiosity, how does NATO make decisions? And the professor, the guy who wrote the book on NATO, didn't know how to answer the question of what is the decision-making process. Yeah. Because he's not actually an expert in anything other than statistical methodology.
Yeah.
Because
behavioralism.
It wasn't just behavior. It was quantitative methodology. It was obsession by political scientists that they were not economists. It was obsession of economists.
The social sciences are sciences.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think the problem with what we do, and that I think the four of us in this room understand, more than maybe anything else. I mean, we make wrong forecasts all the time, but I think what we understand is that what we're operating with is a lot of grays, a lot of uncertainty, and there needs to be a little bit of voodoo there. Like that's unfortunately what we do for a living.
Should be called political science. Should be called political art.
Art. Yeah. Well, I also think political was one of the real virtues of Stratfor, and maybe why it produced a coaching tree that was deeper, despite some of its flaws, which was like you got thrown into the deep end. Like you were just given a huge amount.
There was no tolerance for people who couldn't keep up.
No,
that's true.
You were given a huge amount of responsibility as a 24-something fresh out of college, and it was either you figure it out or you don't figure it out. And that has a way of weeding out the people who can't do it. People often ask me, like, what does it take to be an analyst? And it's like, most people are smart enough to be an analyst. The hard part is, to your point, is to have the courage to say the thing that nobody else thinks, or which is going to make people look at you like you're crazy. And then the courage to keep doing it after you're wrong, because you're going to be wrong half the time, more than half the time. Even, the best of us are wrong more than half the time. And it's that ability to like have simultaneously incredible arrogance about like your ability to predict these things, and also incredible humility to know how little you know, that like breeds our personality type. And Stratfor nurtured that because it said, go do this. Like you are going to do this thing or you're not fit for this. And I think that's what it winnowed out, or at least to me.
Yeah, I mean, we always joke about mountain intelligence operation, because one time I was instructed by the head of the company to mount an intelligence operation to figure out.
Oh, M-O-U-N-T,
yeah,
space. Okay, I heard mountain like.
Mount and intelligence.
I was actually, by the way, Matt, I was here in Taos because it was Christmas.
Yes, when that happened.
It was Christmas. Matt and I have many weird connections that are cosmic in nature, but one of them is we both have a connection to this place.
House.
And I was in my place, not this one, but and I remember like just laughing my ass off and being like, but it sucks to be Matt right now.
Well, but think, okay, so it did, but here, and of course it was in a high pressure type meeting where the whole company is looking at you. But the question was interesting. The question was, what are the profit margins of Western companies working in China? Are they starting to erode because of the rising wage in China? Is that going to drive companies outside of China? So to think that we were working on that back in 2011, and that the attitude was, you go figure this out. Like, don't think that you can just go download some report.
Don't Google it.
Yeah, don't Google it. Don't think you can find some report that already did the work, but you actually need to find the people who can explain to you exactly what's going on. And then I ended up talking to a whole bunch of American companies, a lot of them textiles, and they were offended. If you called and asked them what their because they thought you were probably some kind of like human rights activist trying to find out about sweatshops in China.
In the best case scenario.
Yeah, in the best case scenario. Yeah. But there were tons of questions like that. Like one time I remember asking a guy in Pacific Command whether the U.S. had changed the rules of engagement in the South China Sea that maybe had led to a confrontation with a Chinese ship. And the guy was like, "You're digging pretty deep there, buddy." It was those kinds of responses you'd get from officials, whatever. But the whole attitude was like, you take responsibility for the question, go find the answer. And then you plug that into your analysis, but like you said, you had to actually defend your analysis.
By the way, anybody young listening to this, like learn how to operate. I know it's
Telephone.
difficult. Like it's called a telephone. But by the way, okay. So let's
Country codes are.
let's come back to your question, because one of the questions here is the future of this industry.
Yeah. So,
So we're skirting that more than our formative moment as geopolitics. Maybe we can come back to the most formative.
Okay, we'll come back to
We'll come back to that.
but the second question we talk about is should the corporate world create a chief geopolitical officer role, or do we think this is too much voodoo? Is it too nebulous? And to your point, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this. I mean, on LinkedIn, I have a job tracker that just says anytime jobs with geopolitics are open. And I mean, the last 12 months has been insane. Like you couldn't find a job in geopolitics, and then suddenly Anthropic wants a chief geopolitical officer. These guys want a chief geopolitical, and everybody wants a chief geopolitical officer.
So let's talk about this
crazy.
because my experience with this is that this is where past expiration date policymakers go to make their bank.
Yeah.
And I think they're woefully unprepared. They don't know how the corporate world works. Many of them have been in government their whole lives.
Asset markets.
Like not to mention finance. I was being light by saying they don't know how the corporate world works. But the other thing is like, are you going to hire a former CEO of a tech company to be a tech analyst for equities? No, there's like a method to it. Like, oh, I led a SaaS company as a CEO. Okay, cool. Well, can you do an analysis of the valuation of this particular stock versus the other one? No, not necessarily. Like the methodology and the sinews of analysis don't come from necessarily an experience of being in positions of power. They require you to be like bred as an analyst from a very young age. And so I think there's a mismatch in demand and supply. I just don't think that we've been producing the supply for this at all. And so, and I'm not sure that the world necessarily needs a chief geopolitical officer. I think that every single person needs to start taking these things into consideration.
Yeah, I think it goes back to something that Matt said. And Peter, I'd be really curious to know what you think of this, because I think everybody's wanting a silver bullet. Like, I'm just going to find a geopolitical guy or girl.
Love silver.
Yeah, and I'm just going to plug him in, and I'm going to have geopolitics covered. And that's not the way any of us were trained or learned. Like, we had to be part of a small it couldn't be too big. Like, it needs to be a small enough team that everybody has responsibility, but not too small that you aren't developing some level of expertise. And then you have to be ruthless with each other and fight each other. So if you want a geopolitical capability in your company, what you have to do is stand up a small team, a small dedicated team that is allowed to roam across your organization and understand what's going on and pick at things and poke at things. And you have to empower it to do those things and give them the resources that they need. You probably need some young, people who are trying to get PhDs in political science at UT Austin and lighting their hair on fire because nobody knows what's going on with NATO, but nobody's trying to build.
I would say two things. Number one, that's the path. Yes. 99% of people you put in that position are going to fail horribly.
Yeah.
Two.
Wait, why?
You're going to give somebody new access to everything. Just from a security point of view, that's a really bad idea. So the person has to come in aware and vested and experienced, and getting all three of those for any company as a fresh hire just doesn't happen. It can't happen. That's problem one. Problem two, the pipeline to train people who do this is minuscule to none now. I'm going to bring up Ian Bremmer's shop, Eurasia Group, which is kind of like the counterpoint. So I help people get ready for what's coming. That's one of the reasons why I'm getting out, because we're now at the inflection point where everything turns to churn, and my value add from my point of view is starting to fall. So this is my last year. Bremmer's operation doesn't look at the big issues in the same way that I do. I'm the long reach horizon guy. Bremmer's folks, as we talk to every minister we possibly can to tell you what's going to happen next Tuesday. I don't care what happens on Tuesday. I care about the rise and fall of nations, the change of technologies, the trends that will determine what the next century is like. And it's not that Bremmer doesn't like those things, but he's worried about what's going to happen in corporate and government decision-making right now. And it's a very different skill set with a very different training regimen. And to the degree that companies need operations for today, this week, this month, this quarter, that's the way to go. It's a very different sort of geopolitics. It's not that one is better than the other. They do two very different things.
Well, so let's say a company comes to you, though, and says they want to build this geopolitical capability. To your point, you can't have all three of these things. My guess would be that you pick somebody young and try and mold them into what you want and slowly work them in.
If you knew how to do that, You should go have it.
I mean, I think all of us are evidence that there's a coaching tree, like the term we're using.
That takes years.
Yeah, it takes years. So it's a trade craft, and there's mentorship and all these things. So in other words, you'd be better to provide research and buy the research, have the risk officer buy the research, rather than build. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying, if you build an internal geopolitical unit, you have to have a high level of confidence that the person who's founding it and commanding it is a geopolitical practitioner.
The problem is that the model to develop that takes years to run before you can produce anything useful.
Yeah.
And it has to be at a price point to justify the expense. And from a financial point of view, Stratfor proved that it didn't work.
So here's what I would say. I think there is a way to solve this problem. I mean, universities have to step up.
Yeah.
And I think the MBA program has to be massively changed. First of all, I would say that 50% of what you learn in an MBA can be replaced by AI. Like, AI is really, really good at doing market analysis, doing scenario analysis for business practices. I think what universities have to understand is that their MBA curriculum is what needs to start changing. Because, and by the way, it makes sense. In the 1990s, 2000s, MBAs became focused on the world that you were describing as ending, the world of globalization, just-in-time inventories. This is what became, like Davos. By the way, you know why Davos became what it was? Because originally, it was all about business practitioners coming in and dealing with this new supply chain revolution. That's why Davos stands as like a term you use as a shorthand for globalization, because that's what it was. I mean, it was just people talking about supply chains.
How to operationalize.
Yeah, and how to operate. Like, oh, you want to go global. Like, that's what you need to do. You need to make your manufacturing go global. So what am I getting at? I'm getting at the fact that it really starts at the university level, because we need to start imbuing people in the corporate world with a sense of you need to start thinking about geopolitical trends. You need to start thinking about your products in terms of where the vulnerabilities are, whether it's a supply chain vulnerability, whether it's vulnerability in terms of the products you're creating. There might be a backlash based on ideology, culture, whatever. And we just haven't had that. We haven't had that.
How long does it take to get an MBA?
2 years.
2?
Yeah, you can probably do it quick. Yeah. Can I ask I guess I should know the answer to this question. I mean, we're very America-centric right now. Are there other, I know there's a small organization in Italy that trains geopolitical analysts. Are there international sources?
Yeah,
France, Britain, and Russia are the big 3.
Yeah, Russia.
One thing that has this is not on the corporate side, but on the academic side, and I think this goes for U.S. universities, but also definitely British and U.S. universities. I can't really speak to continental, but I don't think continental universities were driving the ship over the past 40 years anyway.
No.
Yeah. So point was that there was a lack of ideological diversity, or
true.
You know what I mean? So and what we saw is that some of the medium size or maybe not even medium, second tier universities, they were the ones that maybe needed an edge and would actually maybe hire a political realist or something like that. But this was usually someone who is a little bit offbeat, but had enough of a success in the field, with their articles and their books, that they just couldn't be denied. Or at the top echelons, like at Harvard or Chicago, you might have 1 or 2 realists. But the point is,
they'd be drowned in everything else.
And they were they were virtually persecuted.
Yes,
these people were.
Yes.
So the point I'm making is that there's the corporate side that you're referring to, and maybe much more practical, but also there's this you needed to explode this suffocating consensus in the universities that the only way to approach human problems was through social constructivism, or whatever you want to call it, or critical theory, or whatever you want to call it.
Constructivists were also a minority. Let's not make a bigger, liberal internationalism.
There you go. That was dominant.
That was the dominant.
But I think you could group it all under idealism versus realism. There were idealist trends, but the point was that you needed to have a battle of ideas in universities in order to create students who came out of the programs and were willing to entertain out of consensus options for what scenarios would transpire in the world. And that didn't happen for a long time. And it obviously had created a bunch of groupthink in Washington. But I think it created groupthink in general.
But I would push back a little bit on that. And I would just push back on it because whether you are a constructivist, liberal, internationalist, or realist, I think if you were given a portfolio of a chief geopolitical strategist in any corporation in America, you will fail.
Yeah.
So I think,
agree with that.
You know what I mean? Like, I just think the world of theoretical academia should be left to itself. I think it's hopeless. There is no way to like solve it. I think that this thing belongs in the professional schools.
Well, I'll push back and I'll say that you need university education. You need some theory, and that theory should be debatable. Should be there multiple views and perspectives, and then you move on to whatever your actual practitioner is.
We don't have that kind of time.
All I'm saying is,
I think you're right, but we don't have that kind of time.
all I'm saying is that I think it's the professional schools.
But wait, hold on. Haven't you guys always found that actually when you get into your 40s or older, that theory actually pays off more rather than less?
I did not.
You did not find
I
it.
did not.
I found, 'cause as someone who didn't study political science or international relations, and I joined Stratfor and I'm having to rapidly accumulate facts and information. What I find is that as I get older, the theory is what really pays off.
That's great. Good
know
for
what I mean?
you.
Because
It did not work.
because facts is a welter. There's zillions of facts, right? If you don't have a framework,
I think it's not about,
you're gonna get lost.
I don't think it matters what the content is. It just matters that there is something that you attack and that you learn very quickly. Like it can be theory, it can be engineering, it can be anything else. As long as you can write and communicate and then you can learn things really quickly. Because that's the other thing university doesn't do. Like it expects that to become an expert on something, it's gonna take you 5 years and a dissertation and everything else.
10,000 hours.
Well, and to the point, like, great, you can have the perfect answer for the client's question in 10,000 hours and it'll be absolutely perfect and they will have made 3 other, huge decisions by then or they'll be out of
If it's
business.
still around, yeah.
It's much more valuable to them that you give them 5% of the answer tomorrow.
But this
And
is what
can you do that? Can you pull it out of yourself and add in some stuff and give it to them? Like,
this is
that's
where the reason I think that this belongs in professional schools is because you need to learn how to operationalize all the theory and all the geopolitical mumbo jumbo. You need to understand your client's language. And I think that that's where we become over-professionalized, over-complex. Some of the things that Peter was saying in the first part.
Apply to this too.
Yeah, like, you were describing how the supply chain for semiconductors is so brittle. So is like knowledge. A PhD in political science cannot talk to a CEO. Like they don't have a mutual conversation in which to like impart wisdom to one another. And that's where I think that we need to, operationalize it. So how do you do that?
I feel like we're making such a self-serving argument because we're saying, yes, you desperately need a chief geopolitical officer, and there are none, but there are 4 right here.
Yeah.
But there's 3.
I'm out.
And by the way, cheers to that. That's an interesting announcement.
Well,
to
like
make.
may you have many, fun days in your.
Well, what I'm hoping is that you'll be like, Fish or some band that says that they're done, and then you end up going on tour like a year later.
You're as like Cher saying goodbye forever.
Or, I mean, would you consider being like a coach to a new team, or you're just out? You're done?
No, I mean, if half of what I'm anticipating is coming, it's coming this decade, and that was before Trump. And
Ouch.
I literally just don't think there's time.
That's interesting. So it's funny, like I divorce my analysis from my life decisions. Like, they're completely compartmentalized.
Same.
Like geopolitics is my career, and then I live in New Orleans, like a stone's throw away from.
Well, you break 50, that changes.
But but I think in terms of operationalizing, like, it matters how old you are. See, if you're 18, I think you actually do need to study some theory, but I just don't think it should be one theory. I think there should be some economic theory. There should be some like different schools of political thought, but there should be, and the more quantitative or like problem solving oriented, I think that's good to have because you need a mixed model of quantitative and qualitative. I wouldn't want to be purely quant, but I'm so far away from that that's not a risk. But I'm just saying that you want to mix. But if you're 22 or 26, then it's more like, to me, it's more like what you two are saying, which is where you're going to have to be able to speak the language of these people who are operating in the real economy or in finance. And you're going to have to be able to give them, like you said, a small, like using insufficient information. You're going to have to give them an answer that's the best that you can provide, even though it may not be a complete answer, and you definitely don't have complete information.
Yeah.
Look, I know finance better than all other fields because that's where, Matt, you and I work. But we're just kind of, we spend a lot of hours in the financial industry. And I will say that this idea that you pass your CFA exam and you're somehow qualified, to do finance, it's like, what? You know what I
Imagine
mean?
what a CFA exam for geopolitics would be.
But see,
There
so
should
that's,
be. That's kind of what you're getting at. There should be something like
so no, like so Kaya, CAIA.
that.
You know, my good friend John Bowman, CEO of Kaya, he reached out and he was like, "Can you write a chapter for our exam?" So this is for alternative investments. So CFA is for public markets, Kaya is for privates, whatever. You know, the point is that, so that exam now, I apologize to all the Kaya students out there across the world. You do have to read some of my mumbo jumbo. You should blame Peter though.
I'll take it.
You know, but like, so that's kind of what I'm getting at. So my good friend John, who did that, who made a decision, you know what our curriculum needs? A refresh. I would say that that needs to be done on a broad scale because you can't start like now. It's too, like, to your point. Like, so Peter's view is like, there's not enough time, fine. Let's assume there is, just for the sake of this segment.
It'll cheer me up.
There is enough time if you think about like our experiences at Stratfor, where you would be thrown in and within 1 or 2 years, you would actually be giving major
I just
speeches
think-
at major events or writing influential
Matt,
publications.
I just think the MBA should be 40% geopolitics and politics. That's what I'm getting at. That's how you solve this
I
problem.
don't know why you think about the MBA. I mean, to Matt's point, like there are legions of young people in poli-sci departments and colleges around the United States that if you went to them and said, here's a pipeline to corporate and government jobs and geopolitics, like
But they
here's
don't know-
the path. But to do that, you need some type of body, whether it's the government or the geopolitics body that says, here's the curriculum, we're
No,
going to
but
be
here's the
inside
problem.
your university, blah, blah, blah.
Here's the problem, Jacob. I think the problem is not the school of geopolitics. I personally think it's relatively easy to, not easy, I mean, it takes a lot of experience, but like, what I'm getting is it's not the geopolitical understanding. It's not the theories that we wield or the empirical knowledge we know, which AI is going to disrupt anyways. It is more the reality that once you gain all of that, you need to make it operationalized to either the corporate that hires you, like aerospace company in Indonesia, or a financial asset manager. Like, you need to understand the others. That's why I keep saying the MBA.
Yeah.
Because you need to connect the geopolitics or political science, whatever you guys want to call it. You got to connect it with the real world so that your actual analysis is useful to somebody.
Yeah, but I'm back to Matt's point, because in order for that to be effective, you have to teach someone how to think first. And apologies to the MBA graduate. I don't think most of the people who are self-selecting for MBAs know how to think. So you somehow have to teach them how to think first.
Well, it depends on the program and it depends on the person. But the point is that a problem-solving mentality, you know, like versatility and a problem-solving mentality is what you need. And then in terms of like, you're going to have a facility with the way the economy works, the way with corporates work,
That's what I'm
especially
getting at.
sectors. Like probably what needs to happen is certain sectors of the economy, like biotech, needs their own set of people who are both studied in geopolitical method and know something about biotechnology. And you need kind of both of those
You
things.
just need to know
And every
multiple
sector
languages.
needs,
The scale of context that is required to do this
Yeah.
remotely well is huge, and I don't see any path for that takes less than a decade.
I think I just realized that The Bear is about geopolitical analysis.
Haven't seen that one.
The Bear, the cookie show?
The
TV show?
yeah. Like Carmi, like being driven through,
Yeah.
you know, by a terrible boss, like
Yeah.
through the restaurant and having to
That's what
learn all the
Stratfor was.
skills.
Yeah.
And, oh my
yeah,
God.
but
Just had a moment.
no, but it's true. But it's like you're basically saying that companies have issues. They need to group them into a certain category, and then they need an expert to come along and start addressing those issues, either with a team or like that individual does it with research that they take or something. But they're going to have to know the company inside and out and the company's operations inside and out. So they're going to spend the first year just traveling to different sites, right? I mean,
But this is like,
Maybe a year.
but look, it's like in
And
the,
I guess I'm doing a month.
yeah. Well,
Maybe.
no, but I
A
mean,
month would be luxurious.
no, but what I mean is a year to set up the shop. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah, to set up the shop. Many years. Like you have to start somewhere. I think to Peter's point, to have it up and
You need to
function.
know politics, you need to do sociology, you need to know legal theory, you need to know economics, you need to know finance, you need to know agriculture and supply chains,
what's-
and then you can learn the company.
But what's interesting is you only need to know a little bit about some of these things. 'Cause it's not like we
Yeah.
can pretend that we know all this.
Yeah,
What it
no.
is that you know the amount that's applicable to solve a problem in a way that's like a scenario analysis, probabilistic sort of
look,
output.
it's like anything else. I mean, in 1980s, supply chains went global. So people had to adjust to the reality that globalization was real. And they did. You know, and that's what MBA solved MBAs solved for. That's what Davos solved for. You can solve for a deglobalized world. You really can. But it's not by creating a chief geopolitical officer role. That's why I keep harping on the MBA.
Yeah.
You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be the MBA. It's just that everyone needs to become a geopolitical strategist. It's like that famous statement, we're all Keynesian now. We're all geopolitical strategists. If you're marketing
most people might suck at it.
Yeah.
that's fine, but being aware of it, right? Like you can't just not be aware of this.
And by the way, I want to push on that, because what that statement was saying is that all economists and pretty much anyone who's a thinking person in current affairs needs to realize that the state plays an active role. You can't eliminate the state. So it has some role, and it's a question of degree rather than, if.
So learn to analyze.
Right. So to say that we're all geopolitical strategists now is to say that not just in economics, that the state has a role in all things, so policy and economics, you know what I mean? And that's pretty important these days, because there was a belief that the state had receded to the extent that it could be viewed as a constant, and then you could go on to your economic analysis or whatever.
Can I give you an exact example of what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I was in Paris meeting a fashion conglomerate, and the gentleman asks me, well, what should I do? And, I adopted Peter's point, like, well, the world is deglobalizing. Maybe you don't want to shove Italian and French brands down Saudi Arabian elites' throats. Maybe you want to go out there and buy an oud company. Oud is a wood that you can make fragrance out of, candles, soaps, cosmetics, right? It's actually sourced in Malaysia, and then Middle East loves this stuff. Become more local. Emphasize these local brands, and then what you can do is you can promote them globally, but you cannot just keep doing the same thing that works during the globalized world where every airport looks the same. I mean, that's just a small example of how in the fashion industry, in this particular issue, you can take what Peter thinks is the end of the world, which, I think is just the beginning of a new era, whatever, and you can still make a ton of money out of it, but you just got to know what world you live in. You cannot just walk into this world being like, what works is, we're going to do a roll-up of Italian small family-owned businesses, and then we're going to shove it down the Chinese and Saudi throats. Well, no, maybe they want something more local. And maybe an American traveling in Riyadh doesn't want to buy a Bottega Veneta, which they can get anywhere else. You see what I mean? The world is becoming, even something like fashion is becoming colored by this. And so just getting a sense of that as a young person who then enters this, fashion industry or telecommunication industry or whatever, I think that just raises the bar of kind of corporate thinking.
I think this is a good time to ask the third question, which was, what's a formative book that formed each one of us? Because I think I think there are some differences in what we're talking about, but we're all circling around the same thing. But I have a hunch that each of our answers to this will be very different, and we'll also be very telling about the types of knowledge. Well, and we'll also be very telling about the types of knowledge you need in order to do what we're talking about. So why don't we start, Marko, and go down?
I referred to it a couple of times in the first part of our conversation, Ingenuity Gap. And this idea that we don't really know how the world works. It's become so complex that, and by the way, this is an old book. It's 25 years old. I read it bizarrely in I think climate politics class or something like that. Yeah, I know. Don't worry about it. I went to school in Canada, so just roll with it, Peter. I had to. But it's great. I like it because the idea is that complexity leads to brittleness, and also there's too many things going on at the same time. Why is this important, I think? I think it's important because academia stresses parsimony. Parsimony. That's what a great theory is. It's parsimonious. It doesn't rely on a lot of variables to prove something, and even at Stratfor, we were taught a very parsimonious framework, which I think doesn't work in finance, by the way. This is, my criticism was well, geography doesn't explain everything, particularly 99% of the things that my clients deal with, are not going to be explained with these kind of big picture things, right? So I think that consilience, combining like different lenses to explaining issues is required, because the problems in the world are so complex. You're not going to answer that just with one or two theories.
That's good.
Peter? It's going to be a weird one, right? World War Z.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
you made me read that, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. Movie does not do it justice.
The movie happens on Earth. That's the only thing that's in common with the book. By far the best geopolitical book ever written, from my point of view. It just changes one thing: there are zombies, and it gets to the heart of the political, the economic, the financial, the demographic core of every country it touches. It's a series of first-person chapters about what happens because the Australians are tech dependent. What happens to the Russians when NATO goes away? What happens to the United States? What happens to Cuba when New York falls? And how everyone reacts to the situation differently, and how not everybody makes it.
I mean, you guys are going to clown on me because, of course, I would do this, but I would say Aristotle and Thucydides. And everybody says that. Like, everybody says Thucydides, but it's so true. Like, Pericles' funeral oration is like Western grand strategy to a T. But I would emphasize Aristotle, because what he shows is that there's lots of different types of regimes, that they're all in different phases in their historical cycle. And so some of them are waxing, some of them are waning, some of them are corrupt, others are like very vigorous, you know what I mean? So like, as an analyst, it's extremely important, because what you're doing is you're looking at species, you're making observation. You're not going to, we call it theory, but you're not going to blunder into this with like a mathematical theory. You're going to go into it like a naturalist who's looking at this regime behaves differently because they're faced with this food supply and they've developed this behavior over time and they had to evolve because they have this competitor. You know what I mean? And so it's all about like observing the particularity of each species of government and then how they change over time. And there are common threads. There are theoretical propositions that extend throughout, but it's not like what you think of when you think of philosophy, where it's broad brush strokes. It's more like you need to get down in the weeds, make observations, note the details, observe that the circumstances are different. And it's classic. It comes up when people talk about history, because they say, well, history repeats itself. Well, no. Then they say, no, it doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. We always hear that. The point being that case study that you're looking at to compare the one that you're studying, it might operate differently this time because key circumstances are different. You know what I mean? Or the neighbors are doing something different this time, or the internal situation is different. And he's the master of that. So I always just tell everyone, including people on LinkedIn who get a hold of me, I'm like, read Aristotle.
By the way, can I say one thing? I mean, I think both of you are saying the same exact thing. Because World War Z, for those of you who don't know, is basically what would happen if a Hollywood producer read Aristotle.
I haven't read World War Z.
No, but it's exactly the same. The whole point is World War Z is basically a zombie apocalypse happens.
Yeah.
Enter regime differences.
Yeah.
And starting conditions. Yeah. What's the outcome? How does Israel deal with a zombie apocalypse relative to
different
Cuba?
To Iran and Pakistan,
right?
That's for sure.
And I think that's what you guys are basically saying, the same thing. I would say that in my political science graduate, the time I spent doing a PhD was in comparative politics.
Yeah.
And that's what this is. And I think we lost that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because nobody thinks that's sexy.
Yeah.
It's either IR theory, international relations theory, or domestic politics. But comparative politics is awesome because it's exactly World War Z and Aristotle, just smushed.
And the other thing is you go and you reread, because everyone has read Aristotle's Politics, or everyone who studied politics did. But
we did it when we were 19.
Yeah. Did you go back and reread it since Trump was elected? That's a totally different thing. You want to blow your mind out, Yeah. So anyway, the point is you're going to have to reread.
This is going to happen.
Yeah.
Relax.
There's a lot of analysis that has been done, and you can learn from and obviously I'd throw in Machiavelli and Hobbes. But honestly, if you have Thucydides, Aristotle, Machiavelli, and Hobbes, you don't need to go to college. So maybe you were right about operationalizing, and maybe you don't need to study political theory as long as you read those 4 masters. But
the thing that shifted me from a science guy to a social sciences, history, political science guy was All the King's Men by Robert Penn Warren.
Oh yeah.
And it's loosely based on the life of Huey Long. And it gets straight to what is populism, what is power, how does a charismatic person and personality sees power? How does it corrupt them? How does the journalist protagonist, who's like, you know, kind of embroiled up in it, live his life like emotionally and also do his job of the reporting? And how does he maintain objectivity? All those other things. I was like lost at that point. And it's also why, Marko, in our arguments, I'm always going back to the individual.
Yeah.
Because like the book that started me was, and the question that always animated me was, what's more powerful? Was it the context that Huey Long was operating in? Or was it just, there was Huey Long and he was a force of nature of his own, and there was a thunder flash and he happened and then he went away. And then there was no Huey Long. I think a lot about, I mean, to your point about reading Aristotle after Trump, I read All the King's Men again after Trump, and there's some weird things going in there about personalities and how they capture power and things like that.
Well, Jacob, you and I are going to do a whole episode, I think, on just books.
Yeah, we're gonna do a book rank.
So I'm glad that we got World War Z and Aristotle in there. I was not gonna put that in there.
Yeah, to be clear, I don't have a second place.
But that's interesting. I do have to say though about that.
Except for mine.
I don't think. What was that?
Except for my books. I feel that would be inappropriate.
Well, actually,
By the way,
gonna say,
read Peter Zeihan's books, all right? Let's make sure, like, there's like 12 of them. They're all bestsellers. So, like,
and Geopolitical Alpha. I mean, I was going to name both of you guys' books, of course, but I mean, we don't want to just be rubbing each other's backs here.
yeah,
Let me say though,
I'll rub Peter's back.
I don't think people realize how big of a deal it is that there was a strong man or big man or great man theory of history. And it used to be completely dominant. And then it was utterly expunged from the halls of academia and elite knowledge. And what we're witnessing with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump is that the great man theory of history is enormously powerful. And it's not that they steer everything, but it is that they create a certain demand for the thing that they're offering. Like that not only were they supplying it, but and I know you might,
yes.
I know it's touchy, but the point is that not only did they feed a demand that existed,
I don't disagree,
but they also helped foment that demand so that they could supply more of it, and so they were helping to create the reality that they exploited, and that's an extremely compelling issue, and it has to do with the fact that humans tend to anthropomorphize things, so we want a human. We want America to be embodied.
No, you're right. I don't think it's just us anthropomorphizing.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I just think that even great men have to operate within a set of constraints.
Until something breaks.
Well, they do.
Well, no, the constraints are what breaks their...
Okay,
they can break, or they can break something. It can go both ways.
So what it is, so I would say usually the constraints do prevail, but when you're at the height of power of a nation state,
Sure.
if you concentrate your effort on a critical vulnerability, you can actually achieve something that normally would have been constrained.
100%. That's why our leader index, by the way, that we do on this podcast, we draft the best leaders. The whole point is like, who can overcome those constraints?
Yeah.
And actually, that's why we're biased towards like leaders of small countries, because they have so many constraints to overcome.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's really hard for like the president of the United States of America to ever make it on our list because, well, you're playing with a lot of like
toys.
That's why you have to add psychology now to the geopolitical analyst's toolkit. Because if you want to understand what Putin's going to do next, I mean,
great point.
You have to inhabit him. And
By the way,
that's not easy. You have to like get in the skin.
Your favorite book, and I know Matt's and Peter's, we all had to read it, Psychology of
Intelligence Analysis.
Intelligence Analysis, which
I
is...
honestly don't remember.
Yeah, you remember that one. J. Richards Hewer.
Yeah, Hewer. He was the head of...
CIA's research department.
I have no memory.
Okay, it's called Psychology of Intelligence.
I heard that the first time. I still don't remember it.
Well, that was also there's a lot of work in political science by Robert Jervis and people who introduced psychology like into political science. And basically he told all the behavioralists and all the rational choice people and all the like realists and all the like pump the brakes on this like states operate on this like, level where they're all like billiard balls and just hitting each other. There is also like a human element to this that you guys have to consider. So you're right. I do think we have to revisit some of this work by Robert Jervis and others like that focuses on that.
Well, and we haven't even mentioned empathetic analysis, which was another of the key tools in the Stratfor analyst toolkit. In my mind, it's the hardest one to actually do.
I think it's the easiest.
Yes,
but that's why because I'm very nihilist.
Let me tell me if you guys agree with, when you say empathetic analysis, like what does one mean by that? To me, what that means is that it's not only you put yourself in the shoes of the decision maker, but the point is the decision maker. Like you have to think, how would I make this decision? Like, in other words, it's about the decision maker. It's not so much because you could do like, you know, what actors do where they live and breathe Vladimir Putin for 2 years so that they can perform him in a movie. But I don't know that that would be the right approach. I think it's more about like, if I were the president of Russia, regardless of Vladimir Putin, if I were the president of Russia and I were faced these conditions, you know.
You have to do that, but then I think you also have to do something harder, and I hate reductive.
One of those days.
Let's pull
I'm going to line up for this,
We're going to need it for this one.
Yeah.
I usually don't do reducto ad Hitlerums, but to do empathetic analysis of Hitler, you have to, like, nobody thinks that they are evil. Like, Hitler is not sitting there thinking, I'm an evil person and I'm doing all these terrible things. He thinks he's right. He thinks he's just. He thinks he's good. He thinks he's doing something for the good of his nation, that his, you know, everything is, God is on his side, everything else. You have to think that to analyze him. You don't get to have your priors. You have to be in his head and try and figure it out. Like, it's.
So this is going to sound kind of heretical, but I don't read books.
But you listen to, I mean,
No.
You listen to them. I like how Matt was trying to save Peter.
I'm trying to save you.
Yeah, Peter doesn't care.
But you have debates with people like us. I mean, if you don't have any interaction, a book is just, so what my son always says, a book is staring at a dead piece of wood and hallucinating.
Your son says that?
Yeah.
He's going to go places.
No, but he got,
That's amazing.
but he got that from somewhere, I'm afraid.
I don't care.
Either way.
Yeah.
But the point is, a book is a conversation with another human being. You happen to be lonely and it's raining out, so you're having a conversation and you're,
You know, and if that adds value to your life and your work, great. It has never worked for me. But I have a
you have
cheat code.
conversations.
I have a cheat code. I'm adopted. So it is really easy for me to crawl into someone else's head because I've always been on the outside. So like, you know, you say 2 years to study Putin from the inside. I feel like I figured him out in February of 2000.
I agree with Peter. I think having left different cultures like 4 times in my life is not the same as being adopted, but
Give you the perspective that most people don't have.
well, I tried to do high school in different countries, in different cultures.
my God.
Like, have
Oh my
fun with
God.
it. Yeah.
But let me try
just had to
something.
deal with math.
Have you had a major disembodying or displacing experience in your like personal journey? Like they're saying, like other countries or being adopted or.
I mean, I feel like, I mean, I'm on my dad's side, I'm the descendant of Holocaust survivors. So like that trauma is there, and Jews never feel comfortable wherever they are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I'm building escape plans just in case. But the bags always have to be packed. But no,
You bury the bag in the wall.
no, but I've been
Then
thinking,
you're very healthy.
I've been thinking about a bunker though.
That's not the same thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, I am sensing this is a common thread. Is it probably geopolitical analysts need to be a little bit disembodied from, if you,
What's yours?
well, I'll tell you, and you guys can laugh at me, but I studied literature. I was never supposed to be here. I was supposed to be writing literary
I'm
criticism.
not laughing at you. I'm laughing next to you.
But like, but the conversion to Stratfor, the conversion to geopolitics and international relations in the business world and all that was it was like coming out of the closet. I mean, it was a total change in my whole life. But the point is that means I don't approach any of the questions the way that I would have if I had.
And that's great.
So all I'm saying is that it could be that the empathetic analysis comes from having been disembodied or dislocated in a major way, which probably everyone has been in some way, but it's worth considering that that's an important ingredient to the analysis.
Sure. All right. Well, that brings us right to the question of what was the biggest source of inspiration.
The formative experience.
Yeah.
Oh, take it any direction you guys want. Doesn't
Peter,
have to
why
be
don't you start?
Stratfor, but-
I'm trying to think.
I mean, I can go.
Yeah, please.
Mine is the easiest.
Okay.
You know, the first memory I have as a human is Iranian Scuds over Baghdad, where I was living.
That's like a geopolitical power play.
Just, like, I was in Baghdad for bizarre reasons that was very unique to the situation. My dad's first job was in Iraq as a junior guy. We thought we would never, ever, ever leave Yugoslavia. My dad is a very organized kind of OCD guy. He had a plan for me and my sister, you know. We were all going to stay in Yugoslavia. Yugoslavia was basically first world. It was fine. It was perfect. It was great. And then, you know, like what I saw was 2 things in my upbringing. Communism collapsing. Like, and what you have to understand is communism like permeated throughout all societies. So like I was like a little pioneer with a red, you know, like scarf, and giving an oath to like
Little Tito.
Yeah, little Tito. We sang songs about Tito.
Now everybody just thinks it's the vodka.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
not a really good one.
No, it was terrible. It actually gives me hives. Tito's vodka.
It's awful.
Sorry. Actually, by the way, if you want
I'm gonna boo his
to be a sponsor,
I've also
for
met
the-
Tito. He's kind of an asshole.
I've met him too. I liked him a lot.
Did he actually bring vodka to that party?
He did.
Okay, yeah, he didn't bring it to mine.
But yeah, I think early on in my life, what I find out was that well-educated, really smart adults were full of shit. You know, and so you start realizing like, well, the superstructure, like the reason that I always tell,
Nihilism.
the reason that conspiracy theories are wrong, and by the way, everyone listening to this, just hear me out. Every conspiracy theory you've read on the internet is complete and utter garbage because people that are supposedly doing them are not that smart.
Or competent.
And South Park, by the way, crushes this. If you've ever seen the episode with South Park, when like George W. Bush pretends 9/11 is an inside job, and then the kids, Stan and Kyle, are like, "Dude, you didn't do 9/11. Why are you perpetuating this?" And George W. Bush does this thing where he's like, "Boys, if like people knew we didn't know what the fuck we were doing, the world will collapse." You know, like so you realize that living in this kind of a world very quickly. Like I learned this in like 6 years old.
I don't remember that one. I do remember when George W. Bush on South Park said that, was talking about the problems with Satan. I do remember that. Sorry, please continue.
So that was, and then the collapse of society.
Problems, let's see.
Just like living
Relationship
through
problems.
an actual collapse of society was
Yeah,
very
sure.
formative. You know, like, and that's all of that just made me, you know.
And how old were you when that happened?
So I was 1990. I was 8, and things started going south in 1990. And then I will tell you this: like I remember literally the day that my dad, my dad was a funny guy. Like he didn't really spend a lot of time like telling me about things. You know, very old school like Serbian dad. He took me to a park. He was like, "Marko, I'm going to tell you that you are Serbian." Like he had to, and I'm like 8 years old. Why am I saying this? I'm saying this because a lot of things that we take as ingredients, as independent variables, to be a nerd, in the analysis are like bullshit. They're made up. You know, there's nothing that makes me really that much different from anyone else in the Balkans. But, you know, these are superstructures that suddenly in 1990 you had to brush up on because it's about to be relevant. And so like, I think what I have a really good ability at doing, thanks to this kind of like lived experience, is just to understand that things are not 1 or 0. They're not black or white. There's a lot of gray. There's a lot of gray, you know, and you got to be comfortable with that kind of netherworld. You got to keep a lot of things constant in your analysis. But anyways, that was my formative experience.
And I mean, you lived in several countries, but it was the collapse of Yugoslavia that made you. But did it make you think about like what is a state and all that kind of stuff?
Of
Or was
course,
it
yeah.
more like,
Oh, absolutely. Like, you know, like one day you're cheering for a team at the 1990 World Cup made up of Croats, Muslims, Bosniaks, Serbs, and you're proud of them, all of them. And then suddenly someone's telling you, well, you should only cheer for 35% of them. And you're like, no, like, screw you. That's 35% of the quality. And then, you know, like interesting stories, like we actually left Yugoslavia to go to the Middle East, you know. So then I lived in the Middle East again, saw the good, like Jordan in the 90s was great. And then Canada, US, obviously. But I think that what I say in my book, you know, when I talk about this is that, and I mean, I thought of you as I was writing these words, you know, you particularly Matt, you do not have to have your country collapse to be a great geopolitical strategist, you know. So
you could live in Kansas.
you can live in fucking Kansas, you know. Like, by the way, I've been to Matt's hometown. I've seen his parents. I've met them. You cannot think of a more idyllic place to grow up than Hutchinson, Kansas.
Yeah.
By the way, but like the thing is, you know, the question is what was the most formative, and it's just like this kind of like mix of nihilism and uncertainty. There are some questions you're not going to have answers for. And a good example is this Hormuz crisis. Like everyone's trying to figure out if a deal is coming or if the collapse of the world is coming. Maybe it's like just we're going to live in the 1980s again where, you know, ships get attacked every couple of days and just fuck it. Like that's just the way the world's going to go. You know, there doesn't have to necessarily be a resolution to conflict or war. There can just be a new dimension that emerges.
I'd be amazed if there's a resolution. different topic.
Doesn't have to be a resolution. That's my point. Like,
exactly.
it can just be like, we're now in this new paradigm, where like, yeah, like 20% of oil is always at risk, or whatever the case is,
We got another Midwesterner here, Iowa, right?
Yes.
But I mean, it shows like,
Yes. Okay, so let me give you two, because they go hand in hand. The first one, I don't even remember. My mom tells the story that I just laid out a map of Iowa, found Marshalltown, that's where I'm from, followed the biggest, thickest line until I hit the next biggest, thickest line. I kept following until I got to the end of the map. I was like, what's over here, Mom? And she said, that's when she knew that I was going to leave Iowa. And then second, I'm going to piano lessons. And as I'm leaving the piano teacher's house, there's a meth raid on the house next door. Marshalltown was the first city in America to commercialize meth. And when I found out that, I started looking into the history of the town and how it functioned. And I was like 11 at the time. And then I went back to the map of Iowa. And that was the day that I decided to, I think I am going to go. And in kind of uncovering the dirty laundry of my hometown, and, I was soon a teenager, everything's better than where I'm from. Of course, that sunk in. But seeing why different places were different. It wasn't that this is bad and everything else is good. It's like, this is different from that. And understanding why you can even have exactly the same policy in two different places, but will generate wildly different incomes. That's why I went into economic development in the first place. And it just took me here eventually.
I always thought that was one of your greatest strengths, actually. I know you were like kind of pooping on theory and stuff earlier, but I do think that...
Hey, if it's useful to you, great.
No, but I think that the fact that you did study economic development in particular, like, what is economic development about? It's about changing places. And, you might very well come to the conclusion you cannot change them. That's kind of what World War Z is about.
I would argue you can, but within certain parameters, only with an understanding of where you are and where you want to go. So like, if you're talking about a big city, I would say the two that have been most successful are San Antonio of all places and Charleston, South Carolina, because they worked with what they have to redefine what they wanted.
Yeah.
And it worked wildly for both of them. For a small town, Walla Walla, Washington of all places, they're like, we're a bunch of poor fruit growers where 3/4 of the population is below the poverty line. How do we change this? And now they're a wine town. So it can be done, but it takes a deep and brutally honest assessment of who you are first.
Also home of Whitman College.
Whitman College is there, yes. Just
random fact.
I mean, all of you guys, our experiences at Stratfor were hugely informative, but I would have to say, though, that on a more basic level, I think we have to give the U.S. a little credit for the kind of like petri dishes that it creates.
Absolutely.
So in other words, you're in a country that has free thought, free expression, etc.
And is federalist.
Yeah, true. And so like so Benjamin Franklin talks about in his autobiography how when he ate dinner with his family, it was like an uproarious political debate. Like people were virtually throwing food at each other, and that was every single meal with the family.
Fight with Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
That would have been epic.
Yeah, imagine. But I mean, also just imagine the debates they're having. Like, are you loyal to the king or not? But the point is, like, that's how my family was. I mean, there were Democrats and Republicans. There, you know what I mean? There was the urban Catholic city, like the city dwellers who had moved. There were the country people who were WASPs, you know what I mean? And it was all around a big table. And these are like furious debates. They were not like, I think people whitewash the amount of intellectual competition that the average American family has. And in particular that people care about, their family.
How many aunts and uncles?
A lot, but I mean,
like roughly.
Well, on the let's see, my dad had 6 siblings and my mom had 2. So
okay.
But I'm
going to guess that the debate was more lively on one side than the other.
I'll tell you what was interesting was hearing, like, for example, my grandma. You'd say some platitude like about FDR, thinking no one has ever challenged anything about the greatness of FDR. And then all of a sudden you find out that the person who ran against him was Alf Landon, a Kansan. And here, your grandma's, basically she is anti-FDR and goes on a tirade. So then the whole family erupts into like the legacy of FDR, and you know what I mean? And you've never even heard the counterpoint. But and this is what I was saying about academia. Like there was a loss over the past, I don't know, 30, 40 years. I think Vietnam did it, but anyway, there was a loss of that clash of perspectives. But America does have that, and I think maybe we've gotten it back a little bit. It's not.
We have no problem clashing.
Well,
we do though.
But it was.
We do because it's not like towards a common goal though, right?
Well,
like
and I'm saying two things because I want it to be around the same dinner table, and that's what we've missed in recent years is people stop going to Thanksgiving together or whatever. And this is a little bit for a podcast, especially. This is a little bit of like cliche, but honestly, that was the great America. Is everybody convened at Thanksgiving and then proceeded to like rip on each other's views,
and still love each other.
And still love each other. So anyway, I think we're going back to that, but it may take a while.
Oh, I have a mundane answer to this question and a deeper one. The mundane one, I remember this was the moment I became an analyst. I remember I was like 2-3 years into Stratfor. I hadn't written that many pieces, and there was a daily piece at Stratfor, the diary, that had to be put out, that afternoon, published that night or whatever it was. I'd never done a diary, and finally my number got called. It's like, all right, Jacob, you're up. And I remember I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there by myself. The office is empty. It's like 5:30 p.m. I'm staring at a blank Word document. And George signs on Adium and pings me and says, hi. I'm like, oh my God, George is pinging me on Adium. What did I do wrong? He asked, how's it going? And I said, not so good. I don't really know where to start. And he said, I got it. Give me 30 minutes. And 30 minutes later, he sends through a classic George brilliance. He was at the peak of his powers. And I, makes me laugh. I pinged him back. I was like, how did you do that in 30 minutes? And he said, I just started typing and my fingers took me where they did. Have a good night. And I learned two things. Number one, a good piece of research or analysis or a speech or anything, it needs one idea. It should be one sentence. All of my analysis, every paragraph, I was trying to prove to everyone around me just how smart I was, how much I deserved a Cornell degree, that I wasn't here from nepotism. Like every single sentence had to be brilliant. And it was actually the first sentence had to be brilliant, and then you had to tell the story. And that was what George said. I was like, if I just have a sentence, I can do this. And the second part is also just let your fingers start typing.
May I add the third one?
Yeah, please.
You can always delete it later.
You can always delete it. And also, to quote Dave Chappelle, like, Evel Knievel doesn't get paid for success. He gets paid for the attempt. I'm getting paid for the attempt. So I'll give you my best shot. And like, if it's good, great. If it's not, cancel your subscription. Like,
by the way, that's what an essay is. The term essay is an attempt.
Yeah.
SAA. By the way, earlier we recorded a podcast with Peter, and we were talking about the New York Knicks. Yeah. We were talking about New York Knicks winning a championship, and I referred to Rasheed Wallace's grown men with kids versus boys. And I think that's also what you'll probably learn there. Like Peter, like George at that point in his career was just like, he knew what he was doing. You were Wemby.
I was Wemby. I was lashing out. But the more deeper thing actually dovetails off of what Matt said, because I also had a very idyllic childhood. Like I've had an easy life. It's been great. But I had amazing family and weird family. My dad was a political philosophy professor. And so like my dinner tables were my dad talking about Weber or Aristotle or Marx, and every single dinner table conversation. I know, but every single dinner conversation was, what's going on in the world? Is this just? Is this true? Is this right? How do we understand this? My mom was, an art historian and also a vet. And we lived on a farm in the middle of nowhere. So it was just us.
What state?
Georgia, like an hour east of Atlanta, in the middle of nowhere, like the beginning of the middle, like the Klan was still running around when I was a kid.
Other than that, it was idyllic.
Well, I didn't wear my kippah out in public or anything like that. So I had that, but then I also had my grandparents. Like my mom's parents were both WASPs. One was a Goldwater Republican, one was a president of the Women's Democratic Club. They loved each other, were married for decades, and anytime we visited them, it was politics. My other grandparents, my dad's parents, Marxists, Holocaust survivors. Grandfather served in the French army for as long as it lasted. They had, relatives who were executed in the French resistance. No, that didn't last very long.
That's 6 why it's funny and horrible, and I shouldn't laugh, and yet I want to.
And I never saw them all in the same room. Like the only time my Marxist, like Jewish Holocaust surviving grandparents and my WASPy grandparents were in the same room was at my parents' wedding. So I never got to see these like two. So anyway, just like I had all of these weird, politics was constantly being talked about. And my experience was that a form of affection was to argue. Yes, and fight.
same
And my
here.
wife will tell you it's incredibly frustrating.
Oh, yeah.
Because like
My
the
whole
way I
family,
express affection
Yeah.
is
Yes.
contrarianism. I'm going to disagree with you just for the sake of disagreeing with you. If I go in agreeing with you completely and you say something, I'm going to immediately start zagging because like that's fun. And I think that's why I was
I think
Yeah,
you
cheers
know,
to that.
one thing that's interesting about this, as I'm listening to it, is Iowa, Kansas, Georgia, Serbia, Middle East, right? Whatever. What's interesting about this is that there is a level, I think, of you've got to have almost a chip on your shoulders to do this job.
Definitely.
And one of the things about the Ottoman Empire is that it created like one of the interesting things about like Greek culture, they glorify klepts, kleptocrat, klepts. Who's a klept? Someone who steals from people. In Serbia, we have the exact same thing called hajduk. These were people who went out and like robbed and basically killed people. My elementary school was named after a hajduk, for God's sakes. You know what I mean? So why do I bring this up? I bring this up
Peter,
because
please, no, I don't know what you mean.
no, but like what I'm getting at is that there's if you are part of the winning side, if you are always part of the elite, you're not going to be able to analyze the world because you are the world. You don't want to analyze it. Just shut up and follow the rules because they benefit me and my family, my wherever it is that I
Way
am.
of life.
Yeah, and I think what's really useful is that kind of like, my dad would always like say things like, "It's all Hollywood." Right? He would always say this, and when you hear him say that, what he meant was not that everything was a conspiracy theory. That is the path to darkness. It's more like nobody knows what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
They're putting on like a show because they don't know what is going on. You got to understand that. But you got to have a chip on your shoulder mentally and intellectually, and when I hear all this,
To have the lack of faith that's necessary to take a good look.
boom, that right there,
skepticism.
TikTok cam.
There are not a lot of deeply religious people who do this job.
Yeah. I think
That's why I don't worry about Islamic terrorism, never have. If you're a religious zealot, you can't find Iowa on a map. I'm not scared.
Well, you're very predictable also.
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
But what I'm getting at, what you just said is like, that's like the core of this, I do think there's like not an ideological commitment to it, but to be a practitioner of this craft, you really need to have that. You don't have to be a nihilist like personally, but you have to have this ability to analyze.
That does explain kind of our current political moment to a degree.
How so?
Because the Democrats, I'm vastly overgeneralizing here. For the last 15, 20 years, the Democrats have become deeply religiously not religious.
Oh, yeah.
Whereas MAGA has fabricated a cult.
Right.
And neither of them are capable of looking at the world from any angle but their own.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that statement, though, is that if America's going to end up with a consensus and a more moderate policy,
It'll be without them.
Well, it'll be with the religious Democrats and the religious conservatives, right?
The religious Democrats and the non-religious conservatives.
Well, what I'm saying is you say MAGA or anti-establishment republicanism fabricated a cult, right? Well, that would be idolatry.
That's so flat out what it is.
Yeah, so
it's the right. We're there.
Yeah, but it's the rhinos who would represent more of a traditional religious conservatism.
And they're gone as a political force at the moment.
But if they allied with the evangelical Democrats who are emerging in this cycle,
Maybe.
Tallarico in Texas.
Exactly.
Great example.
And I'm not saying we need a religious revival. I mean, I am probably one of the few geopolitical strategists who does have a religion and cares somewhat. But what I would say is that it's not about having a revivalism like a great awakening. It's more about, though, do you have principles that are not dictated by the leadership of the party at this particular moment?
You're by your heffa.
But I think by definition, what I found in my career of training people to do this job is when you bring your whole life and morality to this job, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
You got to separate. So as I get older,
home or whatever.
As I get older, I'm more and more sympathetic to your view, Matt, that you do need some spirituality or religiousness.
Yeah. That might be for
sanity.
Personal sanity, yes.
I think that's different. Like for me, this is a sport. Like I'm just playing a game.
Yeah.
I'm having fun. Like
No,
it's
you're
just
analyzing.
great.
Yeah.
So I sympathize with that view.
Yes,
because,
I do too.
Yeah, because the point, it's not that I at no point do you need to leave your principles at home, because
No,
your
you don't,
principles
of
are still
course
valid
not.
at any time.
Yes.
But it's when you're analyzing, the Burmese government, obviously your particular perspective doesn't mean anything.
What you're getting at, Matt, is that you can still have principles and morality. You bring them to this job, you're fired.
Well,
Unless you find yourself in a position where you're making policy.
well, no,
That's a different
no,
conversation.
actually, it's actually more complicated
Fine.
than what you're saying.
But that's not what we
because-
do.
No, but it's actually more complicated than what you're saying, because in an operational corporate context, you need to make ethical decisions in your corporate, and I know you do because I've seen you as a manager. You need to make ethical decisions in your corporate role. It's just the analysis. Analysis
So that's
is
why,
something
yeah.
that takes place in this in mental space that has to be free of
Devoid of
outside-
bias,
Yeah,
yeah.
it has to be.
As much as you can.
Maybe this is off the wall. I know we have to start sort of wrapping it up, but because I think we talked about our different experiences, but I actually think maybe one of the things that all of our different experiences have had is that we're all very confident about our own moral center, or lack thereof in your case, Mr. Nihilist. Whereas probably like the reflexive idolatry of the MAGA camp, or the hard left and the crazy things that they're doing, that belies a deep insecurity in what they actually think or believe. I don't think they actually know or believe.
I hope it's insecurity.
Maybe.
Because the alternative is fucking terrifying.
But check it out. Just to be
But
clear.
the only way I can play and
good
like
point.
talk and things like that is because you're not like, I mean, I'm open to having my mind changed, but I know who I am. I know what I think about what is good. Like, I'm willing to talk about it, and like, but I have my identity. Like the conversation does not change my identity. Whereas the folks that we're talking about, their identity is up for grabs. It's like, what did Tucker say? Well, I got to stitch it into my identity.
Yeah.
What did I hear on?
You know the people that are the best at helping you ground yourself on this planet? Fallen Mormons. Because they've seen it from both extremes and they found a middle way for themselves.
Well, anyone who had a rigid doctrine,
To be clear,
no matter what
I love
their doctrine-
Mormons too, but I won't drink with them.
But think about fallen. Think about
They won't
fallen
drink
Marxists. Think about fallen Marxists. I mean, those are great analysts
They're
too.
mean.
No, but they're great analysts.
No, I agree with you. Eric
I mean-
Hobsbawm is the greatest historian for a reason,
Yeah.
because there's that like bitterness of defeat.
And I was so wrong for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. So I can now analyze without a horse in a race.
Meaning a historian who realized that the historical dialectic and all that didn't explain all the things that he observed.
Or
Well,
that
yeah.
it was just wrong.
Well, and he lost.
Yeah.
So I mean,
He lost because he was wrong.
I find that Eric Hobsbawm stuff like was amazing.
But it's the
bitterness that
but it's because what we're talking about when someone shatters a doctrine, we're talking about someone who liberated themselves. We're talking about someone who was in chains. It could have been Mormonism. It could have been Marxism.
To be clear, Mormonism is awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
Let's
look,
continue.
I mean, people can believe whatever they want, but like someone who has broken out of their chains is always going to be a better intellectual practitioner of whatever it is than someone who's still
this is key.
in their
So
chains.
this is key. This can be taught.
Probably.
And by the way, if you go and then put one chain on, right, which is the religion you decided to have even though you've already shattered all the chains, right? Well, you're very well aware that that one is one you put on. That's not going to inhibit your ability to do
No, of course not.
analysis.
No, but what I'm getting at,
Yeah.
what I'm getting at is that I think the reason it's very difficult for corporates to find useful geopolitical analysts is that they're plying the field. They're like plowing the field of folks who like committed to a certain elite consensus.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like if you're reading The Economist in Foreign Affairs, and I'm sorry to say this, but like good luck with you. You know what I mean? I did that at like 1920. By the way, I bought The Economist subscription for my children the way I would like ask him to watch like Dr. Zeus. 100%. Like
I'm not shocked.
I'm not like against it. It's just that
I'm not shocked.
no, but like as a 44-year-old, I'm not gonna like read that crap. You know what I mean? So what am I getting at? I mean, it's like useless. What I'm getting at is that the problem in today, if you're a corporate leader or you're running an asset management company or you're trying to figure out the way the world works, most of the people you consider hiring for that have not broken any intellectual chains.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and also to even like to say it a little bit differently, like the folks who are looking for that position are looking for answers, and there are no answers. To
That's
give
the
them.
point,
There
yeah.
are questions. Like if you're lucky, there are questions. Usually, we're starting with something that's much more amorphous. If we get to the right questions, we've actually really achieved something. But they want to pay $200,000 a year to somebody who's going to give them the answers when they ask the answers, and that's just not
Yeah, but if I want to be a little bit more pragmatic than that,
Please.
I would go back to what you said earlier about how if you can give 5% of an answer, or
Gotcha.
like, so in other words, if you do the work as an analyst to identify what is the most critical question, or you would call it the fulcrum, you know, then you answer that question, that will often be good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough.
And I think I mean, at Stratfor, we definitely practice that point of view as well. The center of gravity, that kind of concept.
All right, does anyone want the final word, or should we wrap it up?
I'll take the final word.
Go for it.
You know, I think that Grand Puba, I think, said the best. I wouldn't be here today if the old school didn't pave the way. You know, and so I certainly cherish my time with you guys when I was in my 20s. And so thank you so much, Peter, for coming here. And like, I know you're near retirement, but if we could, you know, like, I don't know if anyone's going to have a celebration more of your influence on other people than we are.
Well, let's not oversell it.
No.
But I was about to leave Stratfor, then you two came along.
Wow.
And then you two left, and I left Stratfor.
Wow.
And I remained.
Jacob's like, fuck you, man. I'm the host of this show.
I stuck around for that.
But you got to go on and do geopolitical futures.
Yes,
I'm sure it was
I
learning.
flew very close to the sun and learned a lot, and
And then did something else.
and had my wings burned. Yeah. Which
No, so I just wanted to say that I think that it's a great testament to longevity that we did this, you know, like of longevity of our framework of our analysis, that as human beings we want to stay in touch with each other because we know how relevant it was in the success of our day-to-day, you know. And that's what I want to say. Like when something's actually useful, you know, when you can go back to somebody and say like, hey, you know what, I learned that from Peter, like that part, that was really critical. I hope that one day somebody invites me on their podcast or whatever the hell it is in 2050s, and I'm there as somebody who inspires someone else. So that's what I would say at the end. I think that I hope one day I'm in Peter's seat and somebody else wants to do a podcast with me, you know, and share like what they learned over the course of their career.
You know what? I want to do a final word. I mean, well, first of all, there are a lot of fellow Stratfor colleagues and other colleagues in other places that all of us should, you know, tip our hats to.
Yeah.
But also, I want to say, for those thinking about like being in a managerial position, you know, you gave us our first jobs. But also, I remember one time I made a terrible blunder in a published report. Terrible. And I remember all you said to me was, you said, lessons learned, quote unquote. That was awesome. Cheers.
Yeah. Cheers, guys.
It's still happening.
Yeah.
We all make bad mistakes. Yeah.
cheers.
That's how you learn.